This is Mark, and welcome to my show, Tea with Bryan Sykes. And tonight I'm having a cup of green tea, actually. I just made it. It's a fresh green tea. Bryan, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and say hello to the world?
Okay. Hello, world. I don't know what do you want me to say about me. There's so many th different things I can say, but what can I offer the audience?
Okay, so we'll get right to the point over here. We're talking about wind. And you seem to have like a connection to wind. Can you like explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, one of the things that I've heard before, and I think is a passage in the Bible. I'm not sure exactly where, but it said something about, and I remember writing about it in my journal because I keep journals, and I'm very cautious about the different doctrines and being indoctrinated with different things that are outside of my realm of truth as I know it. And so something in the Bible says, don't be persuaded by every wind of doctrine. And I think it was talking about understanding your own truth, understanding your own abundance, or something to that point it was making. And what I got from that is the elements in nature in and of itself, we have a lot to learn from it because it serves its purpose. And when you talk about wind and people and how things can blow by you, or how things can come to you, sometimes we don't understand the essence of those kinds of things and learn from any kind of from any moment that we have. But when you said the word wind, that's what came to mind like immediately. And that's partly that color blue itself. There's a great book written, Dr. Edward de Bono wrote a book called The Six Thinking Hats. And I use this in what's called the path of self-discovery because he says he's a psychologist. So he says, just like we associate with shapes and different kinds of things, colors have their own association. So the color blue in and of itself, he says, when you're wearing that hat, that color blue is the big picture thinking because in nature it represents the sky. And so when I pick that color and then you ask about wind, so now I'm connecting all of these different things together. I live in that color. Like that's probably I'm a very right brain kind of thinking person. So I'm kind of visual. So I'm always thinking about the big picture, and always on the move, always on the go. And that's been a constant theme. That's not the only part to me, but that's been a constant theme since I can remember. So that's kind of what I get when I hear the word wind itself.
That is an awesome um, dialogue there, and I really like that. Um, what does balance? How does balance apply to Brian?
Yeah, oh, wow, that's a great question. I just had that conversation with Tom earlier today. Did a hangouts with him earlier, and then went to sleep so I can do this hangout. But we talked about balance because balance is the key to life. And one of the things that I find that I know myself I suffer from time to time if I'm not careful. But I also see it, and this goes back to the importance, and at least in my mind, of greater life role. You see the abundance of extremism. So if you look at politics, if you look at the nature of business, if you look at the financial sector that caused this global financial crises, we're seeing the extremes. And anything taken to the extremes can become error, even truth. So my idea of balance is always about what happens in the moment. It's never about, as I was telling Tom earlier today, for me, balance is not about splitting Bryan Sykes up into all these neat parts to equal 100%. That's just not reality. Balance is always the essence of being in the moment, because everything in nature has this circular pattern to it. And so everything in nature is always moving back towards this pivotal point in balance. And that's called homeostasis for the human body. So even we're subject to balance. Anytime we go beyond the body's normal balance, the homeostasis, we're in a state called stress, or we're in some kind of state outside of that balance, which means that we're subject to. And so, when I ask people all the time, I say, how many of you ever exercised before? And they says, yeah, I've exercised. I says, that's a point of stress. But yet you hear in popular psychology, stress management, stress management, stress management. And you try to avoid stress. The job is not to avoid stress. Stress is a normal occurrence anytime you go beyond homeostasis, anytime you go beyond balance. The key is too much all at once could be deleterious to your health. But the stress point in and of itself is not the problem. It's about understanding what it can do for you, but then getting back to balance. So balance is the key to life. It's the key for everything for me. And as I said, I have to monitor that for myself, which is why I'm always keen about how I'm feeling when I'm doing something, because the emotions come from a Latin root word emoto, which means movement. So when scientists are studying movement, what we learned in neuroscience is the feeling that we label is not the emotion per se. Then when they're studying movement, they're studying what has given rise to this thing that we say this is bad or this is good. So in other words, they're studying the environment, whether internally within oneself or externally. And so the ideal is that emotions in and of itself is the primary source of information, primary source of feedback, and a primary source of motivation. So when it comes to balancing myself in the moment, I'm always looking at how am I feeling currently, and what's going on in the environment, whether within myself. So is it the script is loud? Is the script really, really active? What triggered that script? What am I surrounding myself with that possibly triggered it? So then that I can move and balance myself where I need to be, where I can optimize my best self. That is the essence of balance for me. And I was never really good at that. So I had to become good at that because I was trying to split myself up to try to do all these different things, and it's just not the most efficient way for me to go about life. So balance is key.
Wow, another awesome answer, Brian. I mean, you definitely are, a person of who he is. And can you describe a situation in which you've taken responsibility for yourself and your relationships?
Wow, wow, that's a good one too. Um, I don't know if I've ever told you, but I know in speaking with Tom and although and even Richard, that in 2007 was a pretty rough year for myself because that's the year that my wife and daughter were killed in a car accident. And there was a sense of guilt with me because, going back to the balance issue, um, I was working really, really hard, doing all the things that, so-called man is supposed to do in providing for family, these kinds of things. But the balance, the essence of the balance was in spending time, or at least enough time, in my relationship. So when the accident occurred, that was devastating in a lot of ways because I went through this sense of guilt that wow, here it is that I lost two of the most important people in my life, and now there's no way to get that back. And I was just recalcitrant to even do anything remotely close to any kind of therapy or any of these kinds of things. I just didn't want to see myself sitting and keep rehearsing this. But I had to take responsibility and use responsibility as a source of empowerment as far as taking my life back because it truly felt. Because at the same time, in the United States, there were wildfires in California where we were living. So there was just a lot of different things going on. And I just felt like the carpet was pulled from underneath me, literally. Like, how do they say um, the wind like left the sail and you're just stuck
Yep.
there.
The wind.
Yeah, and so I literally had to use responsibility as a source of empowerment to really pick up the broken pieces and give myself permission to move on. And that was tough. It's still tough now, sometimes even talking about it because my daughter would have been a teenager this year, so she would have been graduating, going to the prom and all these different kinds of
Wow.
things.
Yeah.
Um, and around the holiday times it gets tough, so it's still tough. And I was telling Tom about earlier today how my friends call themselves trying to set me up,
Oh, my.
and it was the worst date like ever that I had, like truly ever. So it's very interesting, but that whole idea of taking responsibility for oneself for many people is a burden. But I always say there's two, I call them cousins. Accountability first, then responsibility second. So in other
Yeah.
words, you have to take account for what shows up in your life. That is a practice of abundance. And if you can do that to the best of your ability, then what responsibility does is you respond to whatever is going on or what is showing up, but you're responding to what I call the now future. So you're responding based on what preferences you want out of that situation. What would be most useful? What would you choose? And so those two together, account and ability, and I break the words up. So I say accountability and then responsibility. I call them first cousins. They work together. And oftentimes when we get it backwards, then responsibility becomes this burden. But for me, responsibility is a source of empowerment because you get to choose and you don't have to stay stuck. And that's a tough thing for many people. And yeah, it's still I can see myself sometimes when I'm pushing and resisting it against it, and I have to remind myself all the time that it's not a burden to take on. Responsibility is a source of empowerment. So I often remind myself to not be resistant. Just take whatever is showing up and then work with it as much as possible.
What a remarkable guy Bryan Sykes is. Unbelievable. I mean, just turning his life around from something that people really can't turn life around from. And you sound like you're very comfortable in your own skin, which is pretty awesome. Um, how have how have inner disharmonies block your innate powers and intuitive abilities?
Wow, great question. And that's an ongoing uh, I wouldn't say a struggle, but it's an ongoing um, uh, developmental kind of thing with me because I come from this big family. Everyone is a professional family of physicians. Everyone knows everything. and come from a family that was just always talking, but the things that they say didn't necessarily match the authenticity and the genuineness. And that doesn't mean that they weren't. It was just that, sometimes people can get so enamored with talking and not really understand that the difference between talking and walking the talk. And
Mhm.
my family's one of them, in my perceptions. And so a lot of times, to devoid that, or to avoid that, I would shut myself down so that I didn't have to deal with them, which meant that I therefore could not stand up for my own, on my own 2 feet. And it was the same thing when my friend challenged me in that first year program, the Future Physicians program in medical school, New York College of Osteopathic Medicine. He says, "Bryan, you're an unhappy person." And I
Mhm.
said, "Wow, that's a great thing to say to a person." He says, "No." He says, you're walking around here. This is a huge opportunity. We have this program that's going to, is promising to turn, us young people into these great physicians. And you're walking around here just your countenance is horrible. So he challenged me to write my own eulogy. And I'm thinking, okay, 23 years of age, you're not thinking about dying anytime soon. But I did this exercise, and it gave me the power and the courage to call back home and tell my family I'm not coming back to school because I'm not living my vision. I'm living their vision.
Right.
And I never question what my vision is, what is that I want to do. So I call that was my first heroic stand in life. And the thing is, whenever we have these undeveloped core issues where you grow up in a family that, everything's about what your parents say or what your elders say, and you're never questioning your own. You grow up with these and this doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that I was always the contrarian in the family, so it really shouldn't surprise anyone that I was doing what I wanted to do. But it was always this fight to do it. And so a lot of times I find myself now, even when I see a business opportunity, even when I see a good deal and I'm working with people, I can very easily shut myself off, although I know to jump in and just do it and not try to censor, not try to figure out and think I have to have all the answers, because as I've always learned, the person that has an answer to everything isn't necessarily the smartest, it's the one that asks the right questions.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes I find myself very quickly just shutting myself down, and that's what I call an old friend from the past.
Oh.
And that old friend from the past, and I can catch it. I can catch it now, which is important, because before I'm like, oh no, this guy wouldn't, pay attention to me because, he's the guru, or he's been in the industry a lot longer than myself, and I'm just a small person. I was telling Tom today, I said, Tom, I really have to get this thing moving because I'm at a point right now where I really feel like I'm playing way too small. Like I have too many downloads, too many things that are on the mind, and I'm writing about them. And I feel like I have to get something going that's going to keep my momentum, because I feel like I'm really, really playing small. And I say, when the universe attracts your attention, demands your attention, and commands your attention, you had better listen. And that's where I am right now.
That's
So I'm
awesome.
not, I'm
I'm,
not trying to shut it down. I'm not trying to shut it down. I'm not going to let it shut down.
I'm feeling it too. Um, now, something came up also, and how do you use your psychic, or your intuitive abilities to like read other people?
Oh, that's easy for me because that's something I've always had. I mean, that's, and see, this is why we need people. This is why each of us must be able to exercise and come to a full understanding as much as possible what our unique patterns are. When I always say there's an app, just like the iPhone, there's an app for that, there's an app for that. And the nervous system in neuroscience, the nervous system is nothing more than an app recognition machine.
Yeah.
So the app stands for associative patterns or programs. Everything we do is an app. The way we dress, who we prefer, how we talk, everything we do is an app. And as I look back from all my years of keeping journals and looking at the patterns of my own life, I've always been a kind of person that can go into any group of people. It matter not what they look like, it matter not who they are. I can come out with two or three friends and I can sense something that goes beyond the nominal, how are you? And they say, oh yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm like, no, something's there. I couldn't pin it, and I couldn't, I'm not mind reading, but I just knew intuitively something wasn't right. And that's been with me for the longest time. The challenge for me was, after I quit that medical program, then went into investment management, when I had to quiet that because there was no need for it in their mind. There was no need to express any kind of qualitative uh, kind of measures of getting to know people or asking any kind of intuitive questions to feel them out. You just sell the service. And intuitively, I knew that was wrong because it didn't fit. And that's why I was horrible at it when I first started. It was bad experience for me. So that intuitive part really is the key for me in feeling out. And it goes back to the emotions again because that it picks up on things that our conscious mind cannot pick up on. And that's all part of science. It's just like in dealing with animals. If you're in front of a dog and you're scared, the dog can pick up on the chemicals that the smell literally that comes from you, the chemicals that are produced from those kinds of thoughts that you're emanating of being afraid. The dog can pick up on that.
Bryan, let me ask you a question. Does hyperactivity come up for you at all?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm um, always doing, moving, and for me, a lot of times it's really about that's another challenge for me is scheduling time to really just enjoy life. I can do it when it comes to uh, uh, how I eat and the quality of life in terms of physical things, but there's other aspects of it that is not um, uh, as dominant, is not a unique pattern. And so I literally have to schedule those kinds of things. And because sometimes, as many of my friends say, just take back, chill out for a second and smell the roses kind of a thing. I'm more of like, look, I have things to do. Let's get it done.
Wow. Um, how about this seems to come up a lot here, but I'm seeing number one in terms of like self responsibility, accept responsibility for one's experiences. How does that help you in terms of overcoming, thoughts, emotional patterns that create negative feelings? That's a long question, right?
Yeah.
So by accepting, full self-responsibility of yourself, how does that help you overcome victim mentality for things that happened to you in the past?
Well, as I said before that, the first part of that is accountability. It's kind of hard for you, for anyone, and it's certainly difficult for me to change something that you don't own. So in other words, if the blame is always outside of yourself, for me, it used to be that, the blame was with my father. The blame was with him not allowing me to live the life that I needed to live. And the blame was all. So what my grandfather, who was, he was a saint. He was my mentor. And so he would always say, well, if the blame is with your father, then what part do you play in all of this? If the blame is with your father, then he has the power, which means that there's nothing to change for you because you don't own it. So he would always get me to turn to myself. It doesn't mean that the other person didn't have a part to play, but this is what my grandfather always taught me. Stop, and he called it the forgot the paradigm he called it, but he says stop wishing, complaining, and blaming, and instead always focus on what you can control. You cannot control your father, you can't control your siblings, you can't control anyone. He says, but you always must be able to control yourself. And by control, he simply meant to regulate. That's what the word literally means. If you're going to control the temperature in your room, you must regulate a thermostat on the wall.
Mm.
And that's a powerful thing. That's where this responsibility becomes a source of empowerment, because you have a choice that if you're hot and your air condition is working, then you regulate. You control the thermostat on the wall as a tool, as a resource to help you to resolve the hotness. But it takes the accountability to actually say that you're hot, because you can sit there and fake it, but the reality of the situation is that you're not. And that's always been a learning thing for me, is to first take the accountability. It doesn't mean I'm at blame. It doesn't even matter who's at blame, but take accountability that something is showing up in my life, and then consider what preference do I want? What do I want out of the situation, and make a move towards that. And that's something that I'm getting better and better at doing, because I don't like to suffer. That's why I like to look at how I'm feeling about certain things, because then that helps me to say, you know what, I'm not liking what's showing up right now, so I'm gonna have to change something. Um, and I can't change the other people. I can't change the end process, but I always have the mentality to invest in the process first, not the outcome, because in the process is where the learning comes from. So if I can learn something along the way, then this idea of self-responsibility becomes even more important. I find that people who have and exercise self-responsibility, self-discipline. Discipline, which the word discipline was comes from a Latin root word meaning pupil, to learn. These people are able to pick up broken pieces and move on, and I centered myself around people who can exercise those kinds of things so that I can learn from them. Because no one is perfect, and I'm certainly not. I know I will, as my grandfather said, if you live long enough, you'll make a few mistakes. Uh, so, but just that self-responsibility keeps coming back to me, and it hits hard because I didn't have to take it because everyone always told me what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So, that's something that's an ongoing thing. I call it, and I think Carl Jung he says we have this morning and afternoon of life.
Mm.
And in the morning of life, you find that the things in the afternoon, or in the afternoon, you find the things in the morning of life they were true for its time, but it's time for you to change. And I think I'm in that state because there's a lot of things that in our traditions, in the family and things like that, they were true for its time. It got me to where I was. I don't try to dismiss them or value judge anyone for it. But in the afternoon of my life, it's time for me to take the responsibility and to create the life that I want, create my own traditions. I was just telling a family member that. What happens if I meet another woman and I get married and she's not of she's not of African culture? We're going to merge different cultures, and so we will have to create our own traditions.
Yeah, it's funny, like the thing is, we, throughout life we incur a lot of different situations, and a situation can be themes, and your themes seem to be, self-responsibility for your life and overcoming, not overcoming, but, you know, by taking self-responsibility, you are accountable for yourself and you accept responsibility for your own experiences. And that seems to be, something that's been, your life or whatever, and it's pretty evident in the way you are, the way you talk. And here's an affirmation that I think resonates, and I'm going to read it, and let me know if that clicks with you or not, because I think it does. Are you ready?
Okay.
I grow in strength and awareness from accepting responsibility and claiming my power.
Mm,
Huh.
I like that. And you know what I like about it? It says from claiming my power. In other words, acting from that, not at the expense of it.
Right. And you are a man that's, wow. I mean, you're just, I just like I just love your energy and just the way you are. You're definitely epitome of positive. You're a guy that, I definitely, you go into a room and you could definitely feel your presence. I can definitely sense that. I think that if you're in a crowded room with people, that people will feel that you are there, and you definitely have that awareness. Um, you know, and
Yeah.
we are our choices. We and and one thing is, I think this is awareness, but you know, we see how one's actions and thoughts have created one's current reality, so one can be empowered to change one's experience, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And once again, it's a tough thing. It's tough for me. I can't say it just because it sounds pleasing and say, hey, yeah, this has been a theme for me, so it's easy. It's still not at a point that it's the fullest maturity yet. My grandfather had it, and I think he's passed down that to me. He lived it, and this guy lived to be 98 years of age, so he
Wow.
went through the apartheid and regimes and different things, and was just real. His perspective of apartheid was when it was a situation where how did he say it? There was a disvaluation of humanity. That's how he see it. He didn't point fingers at one race or another, because remember that he was married to a white woman from Germany. So he didn't point fingers at one race or the other. His simple explanation of it was a disvaluation of humanity. And whenever you devalue humanity, he says you will see crisis like that. And it's tough when it comes to the self-responsibility part, because no one wants to reflect themselves in the mirror and say, I'm not at my best. Perhaps I'm not doing the things that are most useful to me right now, because we have been breeded to think that we have to have it all together, and all these traditions and cultures and upbringing. So it's still a tough thing for me to do. That's why the practices, and when I got into things like martial arts that teach you mind body connection, it teaches you non-resistance, it teaches you all these different kinds of things. These things were all new to me, but it allowed me to um, explore internally and become very intrinsically sound and develop what I call internal integrity. And that's still developing for me. So it's hard for me sometimes to even express these different kinds of things because sometimes, and quite often, in fact, I don't like to be out in front. I prefer to be a vision in the back, but then people are trying to push me out front, and I'm not always comfortable there because I'm really trying to work some things out still. But because I have those kinds of thoughts, people, tend to kind of push me out front. But I'm happy uh, to be out front when needed and then retreat. So in other words, because so much, think about the theme of self-responsibility, so much of in what I do is about pouring into others that when I'm done with advising, when I'm done with the consulting, I need to retreat to kind of replenish myself. And so it's an ongoing kind of thing for me, and making sure that the thoughts that I have are not just random thoughts. They're things that are actually serving me. And I think, as I said before, that's the kind of state that I'm in now. This is great, that I can have, these downloads about Greater Life for All and these kinds of things. But I'm seeing a huge need for it like right now. And so as I'm asking different entrepreneurs and investors when they're looking at so-called good investments and they have these good projects that are going to help anyone, and I just simply ask, well, how does that create greater life for all? If you looked at your processes, how does that process create greater life for all? If you look at the end user, how do they understand it's creating greater life for all? That's a question of value. It's a question of value generation, about how am I driving value? How am I really creating value? How is your sales process creating greater life for all? Is it creating an experience? So I'm asking these questions and seeing the need for it in a major way. And I think that's why I feel like I'm really playing kind of small, because in one aspect of it, then that's kind of as my grandfather would say, if you see a problem, you're probably uniquely designed to deal with the problem, but that would put me in the front. And so, sometimes I'm not necessarily comfortable being there. And so that goes back to this responsibility part. And if that's the mantle that has been given to me at this juncture, at this afternoon of my life, as Carl Jung would say, then I have to be willing to accept that and take it on. I can have the support and different things that I need, and working, with you, Tom, Sam, and even all the other architects, so that I don't have to feel as if I'm alone doing this, because that's what I feel like right now in this particular essence and that I'm operating in. And it's not that I am alone, but I'm out here talking to all these people who have a competitive playing model and think that is right, and in their mind it is right, and it's none of my business to tell them that it's wrong. I'm just trying to offer you another way of perhaps looking at it. And so that draws attention. It draws attention, and then people start looking at me, and if I don't have all the answers, it feels like, oh man, now they're coming at me. But then I tell them I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to put it out there.
I would have to say, Brian, there's not much about the creative plane, and there is a huge amount of room for this. And sometimes, you trust your intuition of doing the right thing at the right moment, and at the moment, the right thing will happen. But you have to be in the moment to make it happen. Sort of like being in the now. And speaking of which, we are, having this talk, and it's been an awesome conversation. And you are, living, a dream life for many. You're your own employer. You have your own companies that you've created, and you pretty much live life in which you create your own terms. You don't have a physical job you go to, job that you created, and your mind is always come with new and awesome ideas and everything. And there's somebody that's watching, this show. It's either going to be live or recorded. And, at this particular moment in time, as they're watching the show, they're probably thinking, well, this guy Brian's really a good guy, and, I have a question to ask, Brian. And the only thing is that I'm in a job that I don't like, or, I'm in a job I do like, but I kind of want to start my own thing. And you talked about, greater life for all. And, the only thing is that I don't know really what to do. And I'm kind of stuck here, and I'm thinking a lot, but I want to do something, but I'm not sure what it is. And what advice would you have to somebody that's thinking these thoughts that, just has questions about the next step that they could take with their lives? And just any bit of advice, you're talking to anybody, any age, doesn't matter. What advice would you give somebody that's got questions about greater life for all, or about what direction that that they could take or whatever? Like your gut advice that you could give a total stranger about that particular aspect of life.
I would say when I was quit the medical program and got into investment management. I was doing these wealth creation seminars, and one of the formulas that I say in wealth. Now, keep in mind the word wealth comes from an old English word, weal, W-E-A-L. That word simply means well-being. So, greater life for all and wealth creation, I say both of them always start with you. Wealth creation will always start closest to where you are. So in other words, if you're a career professional, what's closest to a career professional? Their career. If you're a business person, what's close to a business person? Their business. So here's the formula, and then I'll give you an example from my own life on how all this started for me. And this is why understanding, as you were just describing, where you are in the moment is important. Here's the formula. This is the wealth creation formula that I used to give people. Value creation times leverage. So if you can find unique ways of creating value of your unique talents, your gifts for other people, find ways to leverage that. That's going to equal your abundance. That's going to equal your wealth. And I'll give you an example of that. As I said, when I quit the medical school program and I'm working for my friend, now this is a guy whose father owned this investment banking / wealth management. He had this really unique setup boutique investment firm. So he says, well, you understand neuroscience, so you can come and help my father with these high net worth people that he deals with, and help them with their decision making, because a lot of times he has trouble with that. So I get there and I'm helping them with that. But I also have a sales quota, so to speak, because you're always calling on these high net worth people and you're trying to upsell them on different services. And so I was not meeting my quota. So, I'm sitting in the manager's office. Now, keep in mind, this is a friend whose father owns this firm, but I'm not meeting my quota, so this is business. So this is what he would say to me. Brian, you're a nice person, but you're not doing your share here, so we're going to have to ask you to really pick it up. We'll give you whatever kind of training you need, but you're going to have to pick it up, or, unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. And so, but here's what you had to do. We literally had 250 calls a day that we're calling on people to upsell them on services. And I'm reading literally a script. Now, I told you, I'm a visual person, so I kind of, just go unscripted all the time. So it didn't fit me. So I found myself a model because one of the ways I always say success leaves clues. And so you find someone doing something that you want to do. It doesn't mean you're going to duplicate how they're doing it, but they have a model that you now can uniquely apply to yourself. So while I'm there leaving at 7, 8 o'clock p.m., I seen this older guy. He was leaving at 3 o'clock. He
Oh,
had he had pictures of his family on his desk. He seemed to be really smooth when he's calling people, and he seems to get all his calls done throughout the week. Um, uh, it was 250 calls a week, not a day, but he seems to get all his calls done throughout the week, and he had this connection with his family. I said, okay, this guy has something. So I asked him. See, I took action. I said, I'm really having a hard time with this, and I wonder, can you help me? And he just said, Brian, you just have to find out what people value. So I said, wow, okay, that's simple enough. So all I did was create a value survey, just ask people 4 questions. And I said, what are your expectations of me? What are your expectations of this institution? What are you most proud of accomplishing? And what you consider your legacy to be? Seemingly strange questions to ask these high net worth people going to an investment management firm. Those questions told me exactly what they valued. And every time I spent time asking those questions, they would say, well, why do you ask that? I said, well, my job is to match you with a product or service that's connected to your values. I don't know what those are, but if you just take 10 or 15 minutes to answer these few questions here, I promise you I'll go out of my way to do a good job by you and find you the product or service. Now, every time I did that, they would refer me 5 people.
really?
Yeah, because they said, well, no one has ever did this for me. No one has ever even asked me anything like this before. Not even the guy who I was trying to model. So now here I am going from a person not meeting my quota to exceeding my quota every time without fail. So in other people's mind, well, Brian's going home early, so we have to work harder. All I did was take that moment, take that situation, fit it into my own unique patterns, my own unique way of seeing, my own unique ways of acting, my own unique ways of being. Now, in the finance industry, if you are recruiting for finance industry, it would not be uncommon to find someone having worked at 8 or 9 firms because over 100 financial institutions merge every year. That's been the trend for the last, God knows, at least 20, 30 years, and it's still ongoing. So as other people leave, they say, hey, this guy Brian did this training for us, at this last firm that we were at. So maybe he can come over here and do that. And so now I'm training outside. And so, so now I'm working still a lot of hours because I'm working my normal hours, but then I'm working outside. But that gave me the idea of entrepreneurship because I said, ooh, this is, I can start racking this up. So when the outside salary matched the salary that I was currently getting, that was my exit strategy. So
Oh,
I did what I did the value creation times the leverage. And that was my exit strategy. That's how it all started for me. Because then I started putting together my own wealth creation seminars from there, where I'm talking about all this behavioral kinds of stuff. And I tell them, we're not going to talk about money, but we're going to talk about intangible assets of wealth. That's the title of the book that I had thought about at the time. I never wrote it, but it was called The Wealth Playbook: How to Cultivate an Inner Culture of Abundance to Live
oh.
Well Now while planning for your future. But that's where it all started for me. The whole speaking, everything started from just that one simple shift in mindset and shift and taking the responsibility, if you will. That's where it all started.
I gotta say, Brian, I mean, did you not write Signs of Getting Rich? more than filling your place at your current job, leading to starting your own awesomeness organization of Bryan Sykes-Embracing. I mean, can't get any better than that, you know.
Yeah,
And
but I,
that's some really great advice there. So you had a job, you're almost, you're put on the list, as they would say, and then you became the top dog, and then trained people, and then got your own clients, and go figure. As soon as you were making what you're making there, you just exited out and did your own thing.
yeah, yeah, that's the value create. But see, here's the difference in that. The value creation, I had to figure out how to create value in my current situation. I could have
Yeah,
taken it that, hey, because most people sign up for a job, like the lady that you've been dealing with, I can't say this is her situation, but most people sign up for a job and they go in with the attitude that you owe me something. If you go in with the attitude that you're creating value there, now you have to know what value you're creating. That gets noticed, but even if it doesn't get noticed, that follows you wherever you go. And one of the things that I was told is it doesn't matter, or you should always leave an organization with the understanding and with the trail that you did the best that you possibly can do given that situation. But if you go in with the attitude that someone owes you something, they don't owe you anything. You're earning a paycheck.
right.
So that's a whole different mindset there. So once I understood what value I could create, and that industry is all about bottom line sales. So I had to sell. I just had to figure out a sales process that fit my unique temperament. So once I figured out how to create value for them, that got noticed. That's how the whole wealth creation. And then I had to find a way to leverage it, to take it beyond, that one little corner, that one little space, that one organization. So when I found a way to leverage that and not get myself in trouble, which meant that I was still working a lot more than everyone because essentially I had two jobs until, as I say, one salary matched the other. Then I said, this other salary over here where I'm doing things for myself, doing it my own way is a lot more fun than having to answer to anyone.
Brian, I would just have to say, I mean, that is some great, great, words of wisdom. And anybody that's listening, it's not like the external thing. It's you. And I'm in a job. A lot of us have jobs, and if we more than do our job, then you'll see. It has to be the appreciation, doing the best with what we have, in order to bring in more. And Brian is living testament to that. And I'm very grateful to have you on on this episode of Tea with Bryan Sykes. And it's been a wonderful chat. A lot of good wisdom that you had here. Um, can you just like real quick go over that equation again in case someone missed it?
Sure. It's value creation times leverage equals wealth. So you find unique ways using your own talent, using your gifts, using your own temperament of creating some kind of value. So when we're talking about creating value, we're talking about creating good, creating something that is would be most useful in the position that you currently have. And then find unique ways of leveraging that so that you can multiply. That's the multiplication side of the equation. So, that could be things like um, writing some kind of newsletter for them or taking some kind of process that you develop and seeing how other organizations might use it. So you might, can use it at an association where hundreds of people, so like say you created a process of actually recruiting people with ease and really getting to understand their thinking patterns and that kind of thing, like with that profile that I sent you.
Mhm.
And say there's others that are interested in that, and you can kind of create your own process for that and start training people on it and create a manual and maybe even put up a little blog or something and sell it. So that's ways of leveraging your own unique talents that, work that you put forth effort into. And once you do that, it creates the wealth that you want. Remember, the word is well-being. So you can have financial well-being from those things. You can have spiritual well-being from those things because now you're doing things, uh, that comes from source and you're more connected to source. You can have emotional well-being because now you're doing things on your own terms. You can have mental well-being. So that's what the whole wealth creation really is about for me. It's not just the material wealth. That's part of the package, but the holistic perspective says that, if I can experience that mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, then I have a full package of wealth creation.
That really sums it up. And I just want to say, Mr. Sykes, it's been a most wonderful tea. I really enjoyed my green tea with you this evening. And we're going to sign off. And do you have any last words to say to the world?
Well, I would say good morning because it is 3:48 here. So I have my I don't know what you call it. I guess I'll call it my little protein shake. I have some plant-based protein, strawberry, bananas, some spinach leaves, some flax, um, and I base it in some green tea and mix it all up together, and that's my morning drink. And then I get ready for some writing and some martial arts. So I say good morning.
That's awesome, Brian. And we're going to sign off. So this was Tea with Bryan Sykes. And we are going to say ciao and goodbye. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. You be well.